Hi, my name's Adrian Whelan, Head of Market Intelligence for Brown Brothers Harriman. Welcome to the latest installment of our On the Regs video series. Delighted this morning to be joined by Kate McCormack, Senior Consultant at Aperture Partners. Kate, how are you?
Good, thanks, Adrian. Yeah, thanks for having me on this morning.
It's great to have you. I know we've been talking about this for a couple of months, so good to execute it this morning.
Absolutely.
I was struck by a recent piece you wrote, an article around the experience of working from home. And what was your motivation for writing that particular article?
I suppose I started seeing patterns in how people were behaving and feeling and how a lot of emotions were kind of being expressed. And it really reminded me of the grief model. So, the very classic anger, denial, bargaining, sadness, acceptance. So I mapped our process, how people are handling this onto that, and saw that it was a nearly perfect match. And there was a huge amount of similarities. So I just decided that I would write about that and kind of start speaking to people about it, because I often think as humans, when we can understand something and we can name it, we can start working on kind of dealing with it. So that's really where it came from.
Yeah, and it really struck me because we have all lost things in this lockdown and things have been taken away. But two things struck me personally, and maybe you can elaborate on them. And that was the power of denial is one thing you spoke about. And the other thing, which I've experienced in my own life, is the non-linear effect of grief. Can you elaborate on those two aspects particularly, please?
Yeah, so denial generally is quite a helpful thing for us as humans. It protects our brains from really overwhelming big emotions. But in this context, it's been quite actually destructive for people. So it's kind of coming across in two ways. The first way is in leaders or bosses or whatever you want to call them, kind of over comforting or over reassuring people that things are going to be fine. We're going to get through this. We just need to push through. We just need to stick it out. And what that's doing is, at first glance, you kind of think, okay, they're keeping morale high. But actually what it's doing is it's discrediting how people feel. It's kind of saying to them, sadness has no place here, or anger has no place here. You just got to push through. And that's quite damaging. Secondly, the way it's manifesting itself, perfect example of this would be somebody saying, oh, isn't it great that we don't have to commute? My life is so much better now that I don't have to do my DART and then my bus and, my car sitting on the M50 for an hour. Whereas you could have someone in that group who really valued that time of their commute, and kind of that's their time to detach from home and detach from everything that's going on there, start getting into work mode, read a few emails. And by somebody in a leadership position kind of denying them that, they kind of start feeling, well, my feelings aren't valid. I should be feeling great that I don't have to commute, or I should be. And as we know, shoulds are never good feelings for humans. And then the non-linear nature is literally the way people progress in stages. It would be lovely if it was nice and neat and we all spent, a certain amount of time at each stage. But actually, we tend to go forward and come backwards, or skip stages, or, stay stuck in one stage. So what we're seeing at the moment is, in traditional grief, there's kind of an end and you generally do reach acceptance. But in this manifestation of grief, COVID is very much ongoing. I mean, we're sitting here in a second lockdown, day 7,000 working from home. We're kind of stuck at that sadness stage because we haven't really been able to reach acceptance. So you'll see a lot of people kind of going between sadness and bargaining, or kind of saying, okay, well, we'll stay home and then we can have a shot at Christmas or whatever. So it's all in the article without going into too much detail. But so it's definitely absolutely not a linear process.
I just want to pick up. So we did lockdown one, we thought might be a short-term serious emergency. But what this has turned in is really a war of attrition, very long-term, still uncertain, vaccines, we don't know, okay? So in that kind of environment, what practical steps beyond the signs, what can you actually do each and every day to maybe survive this longer-term process?
Yeah, okay, well, I would say probably three main things would stick out to me. So firstly, try and minimize any of those denial statements. So the over comforting, over reassuring, let's get through this, we're all in this together. push through. And then the second, obviously, that we chatted about was to kind of not invalidate people's emotions. So if somebody misses client meetings or misses flying back and forth to London, allow them to do that. And, you know, it's just because you don't feel it doesn't mean that someone else does. And then the second thing kind of leading on from that is to allow people to miss things. So ask people what they miss about pre-COVID life. And if you've already done this back in March, a lot of people would have done this already, but it's very likely people's answers have changed because, I mean, that's going on nearly, you know, over half a year now. And sometimes you might need to lead by example, talk about something you miss to kind of open up the dialogue. And then the last thing would be, and I think the most important at the moment, is to look out for emotional cues in colleagues or employees, mostly in the form of jokes. So you'll hear a lot of people joking about, you know, I spend my life on Zoom these days, or, you know, these back-to-back Zooms or whatever, and they'll kind of laugh. What they're doing there really is actually putting out a feeler to you, kind of saying, listen, I'm finding this really tough, but I'm kind of disguising it in the form of humor. So instead of just laughing along and kind of saying, yeah, no, same, I'll see you on Zoom in 5 minutes, you know, maybe think of a way, be receptive to what they're trying to put out there and say, well, let's make it a phone call instead, or, you know, take your phone out for a walk and we'll do a call instead of a Zoom. And so I would just tell people to be really, really aware of jokes, because at the moment, there's a lot of truth behind people's joking.
So there you have it, folks, some fantastic insights and practical tips. We will put the link to the actual article below this video here. But Kate McCormack, really appreciate your time this morning. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.